Scott, can I vote? Yes. Okay, great. So this is exciting. We do have some very good, accomplished, prestigious panelists here today, and I'm just here to introduce them and then get the ball rolling, and they will, of course, be here to discuss the hot topics of day-to-day management, as well as answer free-form questions that you go through here. So just as an introduction, we do have the three panelists here, starting on the left, your right, my left, I guess, military terms. Mike Maraya, right? Is good. Program Manager, Information Technology Security Department of Commerce. So Mike manages the portfolio of enterprise-wide cybersecurity improvement projects at the Department of Commerce in Washington, D.C. This includes continuous monitoring, security operations, incident response, identity management, secure network services, and the transition to IPv6. Before coming to work for the federal government, he also worked for UNICEF and a multinational aerospace and defense company. And of course, in his spare time, he enjoys autocrossing, fly fishing, and writing about himself in the third person. So that's great. And then in the middle there is Lloyd Dugan. As you know, you maybe have, of course, attended the keynote session. Lloyd, works for Dennis Wisnowski at the DCMO. He's a senior BPMN architect for the Deputy Chief Management Office, DCMO, in Technology Innovation Engineering Director at the Department of Defense. He is a senior BPMN architect supporting the DCMO at the DoD, reporting to Dennis Wisnowski, the Chief Architect and CTO of the business mission area. And he develops, delivers methodologies and training in the use of business process model notation, as you heard earlier, BPMN 2.0, to model and execute business processes and services across the BMN, which is expressed in the Business Enterprise Architecture, BEA. He has had over 26 years of experience providing IT architecture and consulting services in both the public and private sector, as well as being a published author and frequent presenter at many national and international conferences. And then last but not least is Jim Zog, Denny Advisor for CSC. So Mr. Zog joined CSC, or formerly Computer Sciences Corporation, in April 2007 as the Director of Identity Management and Credentialing Initiative, now Identity and Privacy Assurance for North America Public Sector. So he leads the U.S. delegation in the International Labor Organization Working Group that successfully developed an improved security regime for seafarers' identity documents. And before his retirement from federal service, he was a member of several U.S. government interagency smart card and biometrics working groups. He's also a member of U.S. Visit Program Project Team and is currently supporting identity management work efforts at NSTAC, Tech America, Cantara, ANSI, ABA, SCA, and the IAB. That's what the government's about, right? So yeah, I think you can all relate. So again, I would like to thank the panelists, the distinguished panelists, and what we'll do is we do have a starting conversation presentation, which I'll ask the back to start first. There it is. We have this is the slide, of course, with the blogs. Identity management key to business delivery. And what we'll do, because this is supposed to be a very collaborative environment, we're going to start with these slides, but they're going to be talking slides. So we go through that. I'm going to hand the slide, advance to the panelists, and then they can start the discussion. Again, the discussion will be about the initiatives that the government is enacting today with identity management, security, etc., and then the challenges as well as how they overcome these challenges. Okay? Thank you very much, and here we go. I will give this over to you.
You think I can drive this, right?
You said
yeah, already did. We're good. All right. So accidents happen when you're old. You have to relearn these things every time you do it. So good morning, all. Good morning. Hey, thank you. We're not trying to start to here just as reference material. We're not going to, I don't read slides. Those who have seen me before know in 10 minutes I'll throw 25 slides up. And just to say, you've got it, this is what you need to know. Here's why you need to know this slide, and off we go. So we're going to do that, and what I've asked my colleagues to do while we're doing this is if they see something on the slides or they hear me say something, they're going to jump in and say, no, Jim, no. And we'd like you to do the same because some of this is going to be new. The acronym soup is the acronym soup. Keeping up with this stuff, if you're a practitioner in that area space, you know that keeping up with the changes is almost impossible. And when you add the new challenges of trying to do cloud security, of doing dynamic access provisioning, of doing things like biometrics into the middle of all of this, of doing implementing all of the initiatives, and now saying bring your own device to work, and how we're going to secure that, and how we're going to protect those things, and what are the policies going to be. NSA, for example, has their own mobile device, so basically what they did is they stripped everything out of it and then made it fairly functional. So BYO is not going to work in that environment, and you go from there. So part of what we're trying to do is that, remember the first word of this is trust. The whole part of this is that you have to know who you're dealing with. You have to ensure that the individual or the group of individuals that only have access to what they should. You've heard that. Again, the provisioning challenges are there. The open air is challenged there as well. So some of those things are in here. And when we talk about NSTIC and we talk about the predecessor things that have happened to bring NSTIC to where it is today, you go through where Jeremy's going now with the pilots, it's very much in how do we, this is not about a specific technology. This is about how you integrate all the technologies. Later on, I'll say multiple times, this isn't about a card or a specific token anymore. It might have been a decade ago, but it's not that anymore. So how do you do that? When do you do it? Where do you do it? How do you reduce the cost of infrastructure and get to that? So
Jim, we're assuming that they're familiar with NSTIC. You got a show of hands for those who support the initiative. We're better.
This is National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace.
This is not /NSTIC.
Yeah. And some of us have worked on the industry paper that became the NSTIC paper was out of the NSTAC, which is the National Science and Technology Advisory Council. So there we go. Get those out of the way. So this slide is fundamentally just set to say, here's a collage, if you will. Here's the problems and the opportunities that we're trying to deal with. And how do we respond to these challenges? And lately, from the perspective of an individual, it really comes down to how do I know who's collecting what about me? How do I control that? Not just privacy. There's a product rolled out 2 weeks ago that many of you have probably seen already, where the presenter said, I got up and talked with my kids at breakfast, and we accessed 4 sites. My mapping tool showed that I had, by the time I had talked to my kids and had breakfast, I had 25 different entities that were tracking me and what I had done that day. I had only accessed 4. So we see it every day in our lives, and it has pretty significant implications when you start talking about the kind of development we're going to see today. So today we talk about these kinds of numbers. Why is identity important? What is the essence of the challenge? You know, the cartoon is an old one. It says, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, much less on Facebook what kind of a dog you are or who you're a dog with. So the challenge is, how do you deal with that? Somebody did get that. Thank you very much. and so how you do all of this and where you get help is very important too. In the old days, we kind of talked about physical credentials and physical credentials only. And so you're trying to get that there's a lot of data out there in multiple places. And it usually is generated from whatever role I have during the day. So when I do any of those things, there's a separate data set out there that relates to me, my family, and everybody else. The most amazing thing I ever saw was about 10 years ago when I was getting really serious about this. And a guy walks into the laptop and he says, Jim, is this your zip code? Yes. Is this you? Is this your family? It had all my tax records. It had everything that I ever wanted, everything about my neighbors, everything about the neighborhood, everything about what bills were coming up next. And I kind of went, where did you get this? This is a decade ago. Imagine with the context of what I just mentioned earlier, what's out there now that you don't know about. As you see the FCC and the FTC now working on what they call digital signage. Anybody know what digital signage is? Yeah? No? Okay, it's basically those virtual things that pop up on the wall. One element of it those virtual little ads that pop up on the wall as you're walking by, and when Lloyd walks by, a different ad pops up because they know it's you and where you are and everything about you. And how does all that get? And it's web-based, and off you go. So we talk about, here's what we talk about in an identity system. Who is established? Where's your source of it all? The documents that you give it, we're starting from an imperfect world. And that is that somebody's got a birth certificate from me or something else that says I'm Jim. And they use that to say that's your trust name. The Social Security Administration tells you constantly, we are not in the business of being an identity reference thing. We are here to provide a benefit service, and that's all that card is intended to be used for. Your driver's license is what? Your privilege to drive. It's not supposed to be allowed you to get into bars and decide when you can go. So fundamentally, we've seen over the last 20 years, almost all of our documents have been compromised. You know, you go to a security check, and even when they use the little light at the airport, how do they know that's a current driver's license for that state? For that matter, how do they know in the current time of the transition what a current passport looks like for some countries? So we have this implied trust that should be attached for level 2, what do I need to know, and how do I ratchet that up and down dynamically, which is where that comes from. Mike, you can talk about that aspect of it, where Lloyd either one, as we're talking about how to do these things.
Go ahead, Lloyd. All right. Well, I mean, the last one is the one that's most salient to my particular area within the DCMO, because architecturally, identity management is seen as a major component of the hierarchy of hire end-to-end process. So to the extent that you are brought into the organization, you are then assigned a set of identity credentials, and there's a process for doing that that should be standard across the enterprise. Well, in this case, the enterprise being is quite large. It's also quite heterogeneous in the sense that individual components and command structures may have their own sense of what that should be. So, but you notice, I think Jim get it correctly, is the word enterprise is at least 4 times, by my count, in the section of identity management systems. I dare say that at least the few government organizations I've had the privilege to work with or work under, it has not been enterprise-wide. They have been one-off systems that inevitably invoke the name federated, not in a good way, in a pretty bastardized way, such that the control of access into an organization becomes a bureaucratic nightmare. Identity credentials then become something that is stored in silos, accessed through individual systems, and there's no sense of any kind of integrated structure at all, and many things fall as a consequence of that, not the least of which is the implementation of something as straightforward as single sign-on. So I think this is very critical, and from the DCMO's perspective, what is sought is an attempt to make sure that processes that are enacted out there in the various components and commands comply with the standard reference architecture in this regard, and furthermore, that if we have a standard system view, which is being pitched, about how that should look, that whatever system is implemented deals with it in that way. And I'll come back to the architecture of that a little later.
And this is true as well on the federal civilian side of commerce, for example. We can't even get to 100% efficiency for all contractors and employees. And even if we do, we still have the issue of compatibility between systems. NOLA, which is, some of you may know, is a component of commerce, has PAC cards because they have a contingent uniform personnel. So you have PAC cards and PIP cards, and right now they're not completely interoperable. But the plan is with FIPS 201-2 to bring them together, but that's not quite there yet. So even at the provisioning stage, we have challenges, let alone integration with PACS, physical access control systems, or logical systems.
So you add to this what we've developed in the last decade, just in the United States and a little bit beyond there. We have all of these programs. I didn't even neglect to put U.S. citizen and what we do for border security and border management, which is the biggest deal of all in different countries. So literally, what everybody's asking, what everyone wants at the end of the day, why can't I register one time? And in the early days of Quick, everything I heard was, why can't I register one time and get in every place I need to go to, and I don't have to pay $120 every time I do it? And why don't you guys just share your all government? Yes, no? So for those that don't know, of course, Real ID was a kind of false issue. We're going to secure all driver's licenses, make them all look the same, right? That on privacy and other issues. Aviation security, we've done tons of things in aviation security, and most of us have stories that we love to repeat about our encounters with our friends at GSA and with local airports that why are we doing this? First responders, from day one with first responders, it was kind of like the first responders and the armed law enforcement officers, the armed LEOs, if you will. I won't carry a gun on a plane. Well, we don't think that's a good idea. So, and it was every Bayou sheriff or deputy in New Orleans saying, I won't carry my gun on the plane. No, you can't do that. So the first responder community has come up a long, long way in the last 10 years, and our friends at FEMA have done a great job with that. Then high tech, the MOC, everybody knows healthcare. All of us know that we've been working on healthcare. It has the most pervasive set of regulations, pervasive in the sense of the best defined set of regulations out there. Nothing away from the ICANN regulations and all of that, since that's the Federal Smart Card Handbook brought forward on steroids. It is where we are with the ICANN documentation with Part 2 recently. And I threw violate 185 because the lessons learned were there. Trust, trust, trust. The seafarers didn't want the folks who employed them to know where they work. The dock guys didn't want to know where they work. They didn't want their employers to see the data. And it's because of one issue. Can anybody think what the issue is off the top of their head? Tracking. Now, isn't that the issue we have on the internet today? Tracking. Where's my information? Who has it? How are they using it? So technology hasn't changed. So how do we go to get trust? Oh my goodness. This is NSTIC at the point of the curve here, and it's just what it takes to get NSTIC done. I left some pieces out because that was busy enough as it was. But literally, this is how you try to break stovepipes. There's been so much done in the last 3 years that some of these things are more mature than others. These groups are working together now. Jeremy, literally at the NSTIC team, has reps almost all of those groups somewhere in his advisory group structure. So there is a good harmonization, if you will, of at least the thoughts of how do we make this work together. Federal Bridging is an example of that as well. But how do you start to recognize these things? Coming back to Mike, what you said earlier about Mike and I were talking before. What are the issues we've had with PIV and PIV-I? PIV-I very fundamentally is the physical security guy saying, I don't know how that person was validated. They didn't go through an NAC or a NACI, so I don't know if I can trust them. Therefore, they would be escorted when they come to the building, and I know that's the policy in a whole lot of buildings in town.
Right, and we do see this divide between the PAC side of HSB 12 and the WAC side, where the PAC side, they have their own systems, they have their own concerns. In some GSA buildings, you can walk in with your PIV card without any problems. Some buildings, they have to sign in, turn your ID, there's no standardization, there's no common process. And even with that one side of the house, imagine the logistics involved with integrating that with logical access, where you have perhaps Active Directory, a sort of IBM tool, and being able to revoke cards. One of the issues we have in Commerce, for example, is if we were to issue a PIV card to a contractor, it would be valid for 5 years. That's just how the GSA contract works. It provides us that basic economies of scale. There's no way to get a 1 year or 6 month PIV card. Now, someone a contractor coming in and walks out with that PIV card, they have that PIV card. So it's an issue for us. So it goes back again to what Jim said about tracking, not just your identity, but even just the physical card you have.
And it's the provisioning and taking active on time, making sure stuff doesn't walk out the door, particularly even from the integrated perspective. We've got a lot of IP, intellectual property, that we want protected. So if someone's allowed on, and 60% of all damage is after someone should have been being provisioned and wasn't. So that number is going to be worse rather than better, unless we find a way to deal with it. So doing these things is also a way to try to reduce both the frequency and the volume in the data stores themselves, so that you only go to the piece that you need to say, yes, I need that for this purpose, thank you very much, and off we go. When you think about the thin world and what we really want from a business perspective, here's what I want in the non-secure world, here's what I want in the secret world, here's what I want in the top secret world. What technologies or techniques do I use to move people up and down? We've talked about levels of assurance 1 through 4, including 0, 5, I guess, of what we do and how do you do that, do the dance, and then you start figuring out how many people it takes to do the dance correctly. And what we've seen, things like WikiLeaks, what's the lesson of WikiLeaks? Someone had access to a whole bunch of stuff, that someone should be provisioned. Boom, it's gone. We're seeing these hacks every week now that are taking lots of information just because the game is fun.
Well, I'm not sure I can add any more to that, other than, presumably everyone's seen a PIP card or a smart card in some respect. Okay, so this is my CAT card for getting access to the MOC Center in Alexandria. And for the most part, until I actually got through the IA process, this was just really a pass to get into the building. I was promised I'd get a retina scan because there is a retina ID on here. They've never used it, so the cool factor dropped by half. But
You have your fingerprints though.
Well,
Your fingerprints are still on there.
yes, they are.
And your picture.
But the process of provisioning this was actually quite slick. However, once I get in, access to the systems was still bound by the bureaucracy of what they call the system authorization request form. So that is a one-off or a onesie or twosie kind of request-driven process. And a central understanding of what my access rights should be didn't go with this. And it seems to me the promise of this is that it should.
And that's a challenge that I face, because like most of these mandates, it is unfunded. And the challenge is making that value proposition to the stakeholders. Why do I want to invest in ICANN? Why do I want to invest millions of dollars in this infrastructure when I hardly see any return visually? So I sell it as single sign-on. I simplify it, I boil it down to its basics. With this one PIP card, you can log into your system. You don't have to remember 20 different passwords. I use a password management tool. I've been using it since '96. I started working. And I've accumulated over 700 passwords in that time. 700 passwords. Most of these are probably expired and hopefully deactivated because I switched jobs. But there's no guarantee. and I was thinking of, for the first time, because I've been tracking my password usage, and I'm getting really geeky about this, I've seen a plateau. I'm starting to find sites now that take my Facebook ID, which is not my real Facebook ID, it's a Facebook ID, and my Gmail account, and now I can start with OpenID, and maybe the promise of NSTIC is that, yes, things are bleak right now, but eventually we will get to a point where things will be simpler, where people won't write passwords down anymore. You'd be surprised how many passwords are still stuck on monitors, on their keyboards. I did an audit, and these are IT folks. These are IT security folks. System admins are probably the worst offenders yet, because they have to create unique passwords. If they were able to use their PIN cards to log in, it'd be a lot simpler. All you have to remember is 6 or 7 digits, and that would be a great burden off of the security folks.
And to make life more fun for you, to keep up with what's going on, we talked about standards-based interoperability. The first time I presented to an industry association talking about standards-based, I didn't get from here to the middle of the room when I was done, and people said, "Are you crazy? You can't do that." Here's just the population of how many standards we're watching these days. And it doesn't include everybody. The emerging battle, if you haven't watched it, you should watch it. That one at the top is going to be important as to who's going to control the internet. The European community and the Asian community very much like our trust models from the FTC and the FCC, but the battle right now is the content of the internet, privacy rules on the internet, who's going to control all of that. If you've been reading the Washington Post for the last week or so, there's a lot of things on the standards that are going to watch who's going to, the governance model that's going to be put in place or will be put in place. And literally, what are we going to do? Even the EU and the EC, the European Union and European Commission, who have tried to standardize all this stuff by continually pushing, now they're, with their current drafts, are looking at saying, maybe we need to change this again, because some of the questions in our answer are, for example, all right, I have a virtual data center, where does that reside? What data can I move from that to a client who resides in Belgium versus Germany versus US versus France?
What are the laws?
Which laws apply to a virtual data center? All of the draft regs that are out right now, silent on the topic. So at your peril, Tom Stenihoff from the ABA trying to do with legal liability, and that issue is kind of at your own peril right now. We're waiting for what I call an anonymous lawsuit, which is the first time that someone's identity is stolen or somebody does something of their own volition on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, and the next thing you know, they're suing somebody because they used that information in a way that was imperfect. Kind of like, how dare you? And I fall on that bus, assume McDonald's will win $3 million in Alabama. I think it goes in Alabama, I apologize. But if you look at where all these suits, the big money suits, it seems to be this little tranche of southern states. But basically, if you look at NSTIC, if you look at any of the stuff internationally, the next couple slides, I'm just going to buzz them real quick, because you can read past them like we can talk. So these are the principles as to what's going to be in an identity. Here's the wish list of what you need to have. It comes down to, if you can't establish trust, if you can't afford to do it, you can't do it at the end of the day. And, what's the cryptography? What does that need to be? When you use your bank accounts, how many people really still use mobile devices to do their banking? Good, that's the right answer. I would tell you to think very hard about that. What you do on your laptop at home is different from what you do on your device. If you haven't heard about Spotlight, if you haven't heard about Zeus, if you haven't heard about that, and now that we're finding Stuxnet and Zuku and all of those are government-generated, oops, who else is having reading my data? Particularly when it's in the clear and transmitted in the clear from the mobile devices. Be very careful. But this is what we want to get to at the end of the day. We've got to have some forensic capabilities to go prove who the guilty are when something bad happens. And the solution's got to work with one another. These one-offs, we can't afford them anymore. I think you heard a lot this morning about one-off partial designs that don't work. So all of those other designs we showed earlier are just ways to get to. You have to be technically compatible. You have to have the symptoms. There's that semantic word again. Funny thing about that. And you have to have some policies to make it all work.
Back to that cost, is that we estimate at Commerce that it would cost each system about $100,000 to build their own IDM module instead of leveraging an existing centralized model. So it may not be something that you think of when you build your systems, when you get funding for your systems, but provisioning your users is probably the biggest security cost, at least with the initial phase of the implementation. Second would be the help desk cost. I think the number one cost for help desk is password resets. I mean, why do you still need a password reset? This thing is 2012. You should be able to just pop in your PIN card or log into your email address or even use your phone. Just use another form of authentication. With 2 forms, you should be able to reset a single factor authentication system.
The question again is, if you're still using a password-based system, shame on you at this time. But that's different.
That's a funding issue, I think.
Right. Just to pick up on the semantic point, you heard Dennis mention this earlier today in the keynote, brief, but even security can be treated in this way. So again, with the DCO's perspective on how identity management should be provisioned, it should be the source information, authoritative data sources containing the access rights and privileges for folks based upon their roles. It should be something that is understood in a semantic way. So each of those attributes implied in that second bullet is essentially attached to a URI. It's managed, it's addressable through semantic query, and it really sort of abstracts away from the actual location of the information so it's more flexible per the indirection that semantic information allows.
Now, when I said credential in that slide, I didn't necessarily mean a hard token. It could be a soft token. It could be your phone. It could be your credential, and it is in some cases. So to summarize the challenges we're looking at, it's fundamentally from a delivery perspective, we've got to have security. Security includes managing privacy in there. You've got to have compliance. That alphabet soup up there is only a piece of the compliance. I didn't try to list all the NIST directives, and I don't even know what the current inventory is. I think it was 40-some last I looked. Individual pieces that you had to know a little bit about. We've had a lot of systems that have had issues because of size and location and segregation of duties to prevent abuses. And then how do you do business enablement? So from the systems perspective, we've had large-scale systems over the years. We've had difficulty doing metrics. We've had difficulty doing a business case that is acceptable. I think that last time I talked to Deb, between us, we looked at 40 different business cases that somebody's developed, and literally all of them have a hole somewhere. And the values of all those business cases are unique to each customer. So if you're going to value something $100 an hour and somebody else wants to value it $200 an hour, that's okay. The numbers, it's funny when you run it, the numbers still come out to say, here's what a good identity system will do for you, here's the cost of the first breach. And when you're talking $120 a record to remediate a record, when you've got a breach, it doesn't take long for a very big enterprise to get a serious bucks. When you look at the DoD perspective, when they lose stuff, simple things like academic records at one of the institutions. Oops. Medical records now is big. Which type of medical records? And even with the systems and debates now there of how do you take care of class 2 medications as a separate protection for doing things. So binding of the devices, binding across systems. We've had some discussions with NIST, we've had some studies in Europe about these things over the last 2 years. And it's getting there, but there's a lot more work to do, and that's just on that. So, why do we do it? We do it because these things all happen. We do it because one-offs, location, is, as has been stated by the guys earlier, you can't do this anymore. You heard it in the keynote, it's still there. You just can't do these things anymore. The first part is, we do all these things as unfunded mandates, which is a problem. The second part is we don't really do a full assessment of what we have and what we're trying to go from. And it takes so much time, and by the time we get the assessment done, we've changed sponsors, we've changed what the vision is to get there, where the guidance from above comes down and says, we're doing this now. Okay, fine. So, and then I think you said it right, Mike, when you look at the planning, the building, getting all the infrastructure, getting all the stakeholders in place, getting the governance model that actually works, and who makes a decision on when you make the changes and how you make it stick. We've seen almost every system in the last decade trip over these at some point in their existence. Everywhere we've been. And we took the lessons learned and we just go do it again because we forget to invite someone to the party. So we kind of, when we talk about from an integrated perspective, trying to get someone to address what they're doing, their part of the organization, how it works in a large organization. I think, Lloyd, the process that was talked about earlier in the opening discussion this morning really gets to that again. You've got to boil the ocean to some extent, but in identity, if you try to boil the ocean, you hack off the stakeholder and they walk away and then you can't get from A to B to C.
Yeah, we still have that issue within the DCMO. So there is a standard of, if you will, a reference architecture for this, but that hasn't stopped the one-off efforts from proceeding.
What is that standard?
Picture within parts centers, an example.
Well,
what is that standard reference architecture?
well, there's the identity management process within the DCMO is responsible for the architectural references for the business mission area, right? So the business mission area is focused on these major EDE or end-to-end process sequences across the DoD enterprise. So they're all back office functions, right? So identity management is a component of a higher order thing called hierarchy of fire. And so identity management is considered and defined in a DODAP view, DODAP being the Department of Defense Architectural Framework. It defines a set of artifacts that have to be created. So there is a view of the identity management process that is an architectural artifact in the BDA. So that's why I use the term somewhat loosely as a reference architecture. It should be something that people are mapping to, right? And certainly if they come in and claim compliance with the architecture for something they're doing, that's, they can't just merely assert it, they have to show it. And so showing it will mean that they can map what they're doing to structures within those views, whether they be individual elements, like bits of data or strings of data or schema, or to actual activities, which would be the things in the process. The system view of that is a little dicier, but it can be done. The BEA doesn't actually have that many system level views, although there are plenty that are available in DODA. Other commands or components might treat it that way and create one on their own. Like I said, I've already seen some of this stuff kind of get out, and it gets caught up in the politics of it. Who's responsible for this? And the DoD, there's probably at least 2 or 3 organizations that would want to lay claim to the ownership of this understanding, irrespective of the architecture of defining the platform, defining out protocols, all mixed, and standards all mixed together to enable a solution. So it's a work in progress, and probably will be for a while. So the next technology change wipes out everything.
Multi-tiered first bullet. I think that's absolutely key. Stakeholder identification always has to happen at the beginning. And then even throughout the process, by the time you have an initiative in the planning and development phase, your stakeholders may have changed, your directors may have changed. So it's a constantly moving target.
I think that's exactly what you were saying as well. It's down to substance. Who's decided? Who's really running the show here? Who's paying at the end of the day? Not important.
That's for me, and in my job as program manager, that's job one. How do I identify how can I get funding for it? Without funding, I don't have people, I don't have technology, I don't have the infrastructure. Nothing will exist without funding, and this reduced budgetary requirement, that's an even bigger challenge.
You can't take the lessons.
I do that.
I would say,
Anyway,
let's go back.
Go back.
Go back over. And then the second bullet, that really is again an example of where that understanding could be had at the semantic level, so that you would know that for certain types of network devices, in a specific world, you had this set of permissions. All of that is expressible in a series of RAF triples. The question is, how is that created? Right? What is the infrastructure for supporting that? And quite frankly, that's still an open issue.
Let's make it worse here. To go again to, it was set up nicely in the first presentation. This isn't about technology anymore. This is about business process, management of business process, and engagement, and making sure it works. This list is just a bunch of, if you want to be successful and keep on your schedule, you have to have all these things. You're missing any one, it'll hold you up forever. And we've seen that big organizations, small organizations, cross-functional organizations will go from there.
You had mentioned earlier challenges with cloud specifically. I'll throw you another one. What if you want to do your identity management in the cloud? There's a market for IaaS. Where are we on that? When I first looked at that in 2011, I said, no way. I'm not going to put all my users' identities and their passwords in a cloud service provider. I have no faith in at that moment.
Well, there was one provider who did webinars for 6 straight weeks, and he said, you don't have to worry about it. We'll do your provisioning for you. I bet went through the ceiling. The first time I heard him do it on one of those calls, and said, called him up later and said, did you really mean that? Oh yeah, we'll do that. I said, that doesn't meet anybody's standards. And that's like me gaining the keys. And the other problem we have, just with simple delegation, we talked about WikiLeaks. I don't know a whole lot of GS14s, 15s, and SESs that spend any time at all doing authentication, doing authorizations, or doing provisioning for their staffs. Now, by all the regs that are out there, they're the ones who should be doing it and spending a part of their day doing that. They generally give it to an admin who doesn't necessarily know the business, usually doesn't know the business. So we've got some Achilles heels or dirty little secrets that we are not thinking about, or at least not implementing robust enough solutions about to ensure that we've got the dynamic piece to this at a single level of security, much less multiple levels of security. That's
absolutely true. It's a challenge simply because all the technology aspects have been worked out, but the business issues remain. I don't have a good answer.
And the last bullet there is just because it's food for thought. There are a lot of corporations and working with the ABA, and now that's an international study group. It is kind of the challenge today. Do I want to be an identity provider? What are the potential liabilities for being one? And it gets to your cloud solutions in some respects. There are some organizations that want to take the mantle on and say, we'll figure it out as we get there as far as what the liabilities are. But there's others who are going to, I'm not sure. And you see things, if you read the concurrent documents or you read the certified documents and very specific rules of business, very specific rules of engagement and responsibilities. If you deviate that much from those, the penalties to your peers is pretty significant. But then again, you're looking at the cost consequences of someone breaking that chain of trust, they're appropriate. So the action forward is all of the things you've seen in these slides. They are in progress. They are going forward. You're doing a little bit here of here's what we have in healthcare, here's what we're doing with Safe Platform, here's what we're doing with CertiPath in this environment. They're starting to work together. They're starting to work out rules of engagement and operation among them and between them. The hard part on some of that, I think, is going to be the compliance issue, just because the rules are so different from country to country. That if you can do the containment and you've got enterprise that stays within one, and even in the United States, state by state, it's different. And there are aspects of it that drive us all nuts. Like in commerce, you've got a big problem because you guys are all over the world.
Right, I think leveraging the private sector capabilities for identity is ultimately the way to go. It's not something that the government should be, at least for the federal civilian side, we should be focusing all our energies into. We should find a way to develop standards, develop the guidelines, and try to implement and perhaps track these providers moving forward. Things like FedRAMP, which is launching, I think, in the police or IOC, would be a good model to follow. We don't quite have one yet for ICAM that I'm aware of, but I think when we have these models of FedRAMP where you have all these, we save on your individual efforts by putting all your resources into one authorizing entity, then you can achieve the results of what you can.
Well, I think in terms, I can speak to what the intention is, I believe, with what the DCMO is attempting to do, all the way up to Beth McGrath's vision on this. She put a memo out, I think it was obliquely referred to in Dennis's piece. We call it the April 4th memo because it kind of gave us reason for doing things in the BPMN and semantic space. In some sense, for us, it became a license to hunt, but the teeth of it has yet to be, quite honestly, demonstrated. The idea was that you could not proceed with procurement with a major project. You would not get an authorization decision memorandum, the acronym ADM, unless you could demonstrate that what you were doing was compliant with the architecture references that govern that acquisition, which in this case, like I said, identity management would be. So it should, in theory, stop an individual component running off and doing their own thing without demonstrating that they are meeting these various protocols and standards, that they are, in fact, interoperable, that they are, in fact, holding and making available this information in semantic form, that they have defined the business processes for identity credential provisioning, and map those, again, to the quote-unquote reference architecture to demonstrate compliance. So in theory, it should stop that. Now, has it? Don't know. One procurement that I do know has kind of got out before that was that wall, whatever you want to call it, was set in place. We'll see how that one proceeds. But controlling the money in the federal space is usually the most surefire way of making something happen. So if you can make it part of the acquisition process, such that the IRB, it's a checkbox for them, you have to demonstrate it, as well as bringing all that to the table, having the artifacts to prove it. That's at least one thing that you can do.
One of the most effective ways I've seen that happen is through actually updating the FAR guidance. IPv6, for example, there's been an amendment to the FAR since 2009 that you shall not purchase anything that is not capable of IPv6. Now, of course, having that in the FAR and having it implemented are two separate things, but without that basic infrastructure, having it in the FAR, then you won't have success. So same with ICANN. If we can identify some sort of, if it's SAML, if it's whatever, some sort of standard, some sort of publication, and then tie all of our investments to that, then you won't be able to build a new system, upgrade your system, unless it's compatible with your IDM.
So now we've created a real box for ourselves. Because Mary Ellen, the other answer to your question is, it's happening despite us. And in a lot of cases, let's start with mobility and mobile devices. Everyone says, I want to let someone bring their device to work. And now you let them do it, you go, oh God, now what do I do? From a corporate perspective, you look up and say, well, I'm going to wipe and clean any apps that I don't like or any apps that I haven't attached to a store that I like. Oh yeah, they paid for those apps, or they did those apps, that's a taking of private property. The boards will tell you, no, don't do that. So now you go, And now the NIST had a symposium about 6 weeks ago, and they were talking about the new phones and the dual chip technologies. And the question was raised, how many believe this is going to solve the issue? There wasn't a single hand raised from the technologists at that session. So there is some distrust of the technology, but the other factor that came up in several discussions for the last couple of months is that, you know what, old fogies like me, we think one way, we talk about security from a VPN perspective or something like that, from an IT or an IT architect perspective. Folks under 30 look at you and say, I've got it, I'm using it, I'm going to use it whether you like it or not. It's no different than what we had 20 years ago when people bringing their own apps to work because the apps that you used were 3 versions behind, 4 versions behind, and all of us that work for the government were in that box, and we had better stuff at home, better stuff on our own computers than we had on our work computers. So now we've got these mobile devices with these tremendous capabilities, and they're using them, they're bringing them, they're good, they're doing stuff off the internet, and they present a whole new box of things that will work themselves out, but the assessment of risk, the assessment of my risk, organization risk, is not well understood. People, there's a lot of folks who have nothing on the attitude. It is like the garbage Thompson stuff, so that's good. It's kind of, you know, I don't think this risk will affect me. When it does, I will change my behavior. But until you can show me that I'm causing a problem for you, I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing. And we have not found to like, you're doing good, I'm talking over the top. A problem with a mobile device, no less. So, right on cue, I can do that. It's a hack. The hacks are real on that. The hacks the last 2 weeks have been unbelievable. I mean, there were half a dozen discussed in the last week and the U.S. Search Bulletin last month. How many of you read the U.S. Search Bulletins every month? You should. You should. I mean, even those of us that are in here, every time we see one of those in the last month or so, there's 3 or 4 things we didn't even know existed. Washington Post front page this morning, here's the threat, here's how it was done, here's what this 18-year-old hacker did. Oops. And they're out there every day running top, and there are state-run organizations doing it. So it's not, yes, we can develop the standards, but this technology is changing so quickly that if we rely on just our standard, we've got to police the inmates, I think, more than anything else.
So, hi, I'm Dan Ellis, member of CDI. I have a question about PyCam and records architectures in particular. Thanks for expanding earlier, Lloyd. But I'm wondering if there are any records architectures that define, in particular, the service architecture to support PyCam that would actually be visible to me. Not in here.
The short answer is probably not that I'm aware of. That's not to say you couldn't create one.
Well,
I mean, most of what I do for DCMO is teach people and develop course materials. So the advanced track that we're rolling out in a matter of weeks actually uses authors identity management as the threaded use case. So I can tell you what I would do. Right? I mean, I think that you can segment the service indications into specific requests, right? The DoD, one of them is a background check. Well, that's an easy thing to do. Make a service call to the background investigation entity. The attributes for the access rights, that can be a service indication. You get back a set. Right? All you're doing is just give me all the URIs for all the permissions that I should have for all the systems based on my profile. And then a third would be, all right, maybe I have some kind of rule engine or some kind of construct like that, which resolves conflicts, because it might be that if I have this set of permissions for this system, this set of permissions for this other network, they're in conflict. Those 2 individual understandings will not be known to each other, but something can resolve them. So like I said, for up to me, I can identify mechanically 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 different service indications, and there's no reason if I can't make it that granular, I can't define a service architecture to enable it.
And there are tool sets out there that will allow you to enable those things. The problem is you have to be very good at using those tool sets and keeping them up as you change. They have to change as well. They're out there. People kind of don't use it as well in many cases as I think they could.
Questions?
Aha!
I don't think it is bleak as we're saying. I'm seeing it out there. I think it's another answer to your question is you build things that are helpful to the users, even if they're
funded in the level they need to be. Two, it's a growing trend in many parts of our infrastructure, including contractors in the government, to lump all of this under the cybersecurity banner without recognizing the distinctions of what we do in identity and what cyber does and where the overlap is. And getting things lumped in, particularly as budgets get tight, I don't think it's bleak, but I think it's very dangerous, and people are trying to oversimplify some of the solutions, or been there, done that, and no, it continues to change. So eternal vigilance is the watchword, the privacy and the solutions, and I think that we have to continue that.
So 3 more minutes, but just to follow on that, actually one of the award winners, and I know they couldn't attend today, they're from San Francisco, well, they have offices all over the place, but the person who would be able to attend couldn't attend because from San Francisco, and there's travel and tickets. But there is information. Mill Connect is a very large, Mill Connect, all of the users, active duty, retirees, their family members, PAC card integration, and the portal is actually accessible to the public when they need to log into PAC card. 42 million users. That one is also another implementation, and there's information out there that they set up. It's, again, Mill Connect is part of the EMPC. And so they have, there is, like you said, implementations that have been successful, and so there is hope, right?
So the real question is issues, we haven't covered a whole lot of new ground, but basically a common sense of what you do for your own stuff. I hope you do this stuff for your own networks to boot. Any of you that haven't had your home networks compromised by your neighbor's home networks at some point, or a power outage, haven't had experienced the joy of going, where did that message come from, or where did that blue screen come from? But it's real, and so you multiply that